That's the right-hand one. Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council's Overview Committee meeting on 24th of October 2024. I'm your chair, Councillor Anne Hall. The meeting is being recorded and is live on the Council's YouTube channel. There is no fire alarm drill anticipated this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the green running man signs, which are found above the doors, and make your way to the rear of the car park. The organiser of the meeting will tell you when it is safe to return. Please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. Agenda item number 1, apologies. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Aurora Bailey, Councillor Brian Bailey, Councillor Blakey, Councillor Fernley, Councillor Johns and Councillor Vidal. And I can confirm that here in the meeting we have present Councillor Martin, Councillor Haggerty, Councillor Davey, Councillor Heath and Councillor Levine.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Agenda item number 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of May 2024, back in the start of the summer. Pages 3 to 5. Does any councillor have any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of May? No comments? Thank you. And the minutes are agreed then. Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Mindful of the Code of Conduct, do any members of the committee have any declarations? Please state your declaration, including which agenda item your declaration relates to. State what exactly the interest is and the specific type of interest you're declaring. Are there any councillors with any declarations of interest? No. Any other councillors in the... Oh, sorry. Councillor Dumper.
Yes, affects NRI at Exmouth Town Council, and particularly because I'm one of those working on the tree forum there.
Thank you very much. And yeah, outside of councillors and members out in the outer ring?
Chair, I'm a trustee of Sidmouth Arboretum. I don't know if that's an interest you want to hear or not. It is mentioned in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Anyone else? No.
Sorry. Councillor Barlow, what sort of an interest are you declaring? Is it also an affects NRI?
I'm asking for advice. As I said, I don't think I've got no gain from it. I don't think the Arboretum will have any gain from it, but it is mentioned in the report and I thought I should bring it to someone's attention just to be safe, rather than someone beat me up later.
Okay, it's difficult to give you advice without all of the information at this stage. I think I would probably take the view that it's a high-level strategy and therefore it is unlikely to be more relevant than that. But if there is anything, as you go through it, if there is anything that becomes more specific to the group, then you may need to reconsider that. But I can't really advise without knowing more information.
Thank you, Anita. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential and exempt items. There are also none. So moving on to agenda item 7, East Devon Trees, Hedgerow and Woodland Strategy, which you'll find on pages 6 to 74. I would like to welcome Will Dommett, District Ecologist, to introduce this report. Thank you, Will.
I'm just going to reshuffle that.
Yeah, come on over, Will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Just introducing the tree, hedge and woodland strategy update. So I'm going to provide a quick overview from the officer's perspective, and we have Ben here from Tree Economics, who's going to go into the detail of the kind of development of the strategy. So the tree strategy, tree, hedge and woodland strategy follows on from the Devon tree and woodland strategy. The process started in July 2024. I know that members are very keen for a tree strategy for quite a while, and it follows on from the climate change or climate emergency declaration and further nature recovery or nature emergency declarations. It's intended to be a 10-year strategy, and it's been quite an iterative process to get where it is at the moment. Some of the aims are high-level aims, set measurable and achievable outcomes for over a 10-year period to do with embedding principles of the right tree for the right place. Also provide benchmarking of the existing treescape within East Devon. Some of the headlines are approximately halfway through the process now. It's been a very constricted time frame to produce a strategy. It's at the moment developing the themes and aligning these with the actions within the plan and trying to tie it up or create synergy with the tree and woodland strategy for Devon, the climate change strategy, the local plan review, which is currently undergoing at the moment, and the nature recovery plan as well, which is aimed to follow from the tree strategy. So I'm part of the client lead group. Charlie Powden, the Assistant Director for Countryside and Leisure, who happens to be away today, is kind of the lead of the group. My colleague Chris is here, who's Landscape Officer for East Devon District Council. We also have Alistair and James, who are the ARB team manager and the Countryside manager. And also we've had Rosie Walker from the Woodland Trust kind of feeding into our kind of group. The kind of purpose of our group is being provide. So purpose of our group is having kind of regular client meetings with consultants to review draft strategy iterations, to refine the strategy, help refine it. We really wanted to have a focus on an East Devon context, really provide the kind of, so it marries up with the district. We really want hedges to be an important part of the strategy, kind of on the same footing as kind of woodlands and trees. At the same time as working on the strategy, the officers as well have also been working on the local plan review in terms of trying to redraft the tree and hedge policy, and that kind of covers other habitats as well, such as wood pasture or habitats of principal importance that might be captured within that. Biodiversity net gain is another area which captures trees and hedges, for example. So that's kind of been working in tandem as well as the strategy work. So, as I say, we want it to have a real East Devon flavour in terms of the varied treescape, which is incredibly varied in the district. Some of the key themes from the kind of feedback we've had, and Ben's going to touch on this, is the kind of key themes of community engagement, working with various stakeholders, so external parties being LPA. We don't have resources to plant millions of trees, for example, so working with partners is key. I think the other big thing is development is coming out of this as well. Again, as LPA, development is one of the areas that we're heavily involved with, so ensuring that we can kind of retain, enhance trees and hedges where we can, and where unavoidable losses happen, that measures are undertaken to ensure they're kind of replaced or being established and looked after, essentially. A kind of quick timeline. The timeline stretched a little bit from when it was commissioned, but we wanted to get a really good strategy rather than just knocking something out the door. So a few more things to come before it's ready. So we have a second public consultation. We have internal stakeholder workshops, so with the relevant directorates that the strategy will affect within the council. Following on from the main strategy will be a costed delivery plan as well. And then following that, there'll be a final version of the tree strategy for publication. Within the report, I guess there's two recommendations following from the overview committee for the adoption of the tree strategy, or recommendation for the adoption of the tree strategy when it goes to Cabinet, and endorse the strategy's proposal to appoint a part-time tree and woodland projects officer which the resources have been identified for that. That's not a request for new resources. And so that's kind of my kind of overview part, and I'll pass over to Ben now from Tree Economics to kind of give a dive into kind of the process that they've been going through.
Thank you, Will, and over to Ben Coles from
Just
Tree.
the arrow to head through them. Okay, so as Will said, we started working with East Devon the end of June. We held an initial meeting with East Devon District Council officers to get their feedback, advice on policies. We then carried out a policy review, starting at international level. Some European policies still in effect, national policies and then regional policies, so Devon and East Devon District Council. The first piece of work we started undertaking was the benchmarking that Will mentioned. So we carried out some quite extensive canopy mapping across the district now. We initially used Google Environmental Insights Explorer aerial imagery to assess the actual amount of tree canopy cover across East Devon. And we've since gone on to break that down. So we looked at it at ward level initially. Some wards faring extremely well, and just a couple of wards in the district, which were Exmouth Town and Cranbrook, down at 10%. But the district as a whole has over the government's target of 16%, and it's actually over 20%. It's a very healthy tree canopy cover. We've since now broken that down into just urban and rural canopy cover, and also looked at the different types of trees, woodlands and hedges that create that canopy. So we've got coniferous woodland, broadleaf woodland, riparian woodland, hedges, orchards, and then open grown small groups of trees that don't fit into any of those other categories. We've held several stakeholder engagement sessions, both sort of internally, some of you have been to, from a councillor's perspective, and with external stakeholders, local landowners, industry experts, Forestry Commission, Woodland Trust and the like, to input into the strategy and give advice and identify areas where they can help. We've now created an initial draft, which is with the core team for review at the moment. We held a session with councillors on some vision setting, which I'll show you in a minute. Then I believe the week after next we'll be sitting down and really sort of trying to nail down the prioritisation of all the KPIs and the actions that are associated with those KPIs. It will then go out to consultation again, final edits, and then the strategy will be published in December, I believe. So in the public engagement, 89% of consultees were members of the public, and a pretty broad range of areas there who contributed to the consultation process. Reassuringly, 95% of the public thought that trees were important to East Devon's, trees, hedges and woodlands were important to Devon's landscape. 76% of the population felt there were too few trees, although 97% of the population could see trees from their property, so you're faring fairly well there as a district. The biggest amount of trees that could be seen were privately owned, then 29% of trees part of woodland or hedge, dropping down for street trees and park trees and unknown, and generally speaking a fairly good level of satisfaction with the trees that they can see from their homes. Again, 92% of the public support East Devon actively encouraging new tree planting across both their own locations and private. 42% of residents were neutral about the trees in the district, 29% satisfied, 19% dissatisfied, and 7% very dissatisfied. And then the benefits that trees, hedges and woodlands provide that are most important. The most significant number of consultees felt providing wildlife habitat, which is is good, and all the work that's currently being carried out with natural generation and habitat restoration across the district, and the policy should reflect that. Improving air quality, but make the place beautiful. You can see hopefully see all of those responses there. So in terms of a vision, we've sort of at the moment gone with, I think some of you were here, we split into 2 sessions and asked everyone to contribute and what they thought the vision for East Devon's trees and woodlands could be. There was cherishing came up a lot, enriching the landscape, and throughout the process, I mean, it's quite easy to be quite prescriptive in writing tree strategies, and what we've really sort of discovered on the journey with East Devon is how many things you are doing well as a district. Obviously, as a district council, your ability to actually influence sort of large-scale canopy change by planting on your land is limited, with limited amount of land, and the county council being responsible for street trees. But certainly, it's drawing attention to groups like the Devon Hedge Group and Devon Tree Strategy, and groups from there that can help play a part in really protecting what is a beautiful part of the countryside. So yeah, East Devon, where trees, hedges, woodlands are cherished and enhanced, enriching our landscape economy and the well-being of all who live and visit. It may be refined. It was a sort of consensus of all the feedback we got in the vision setting session, though. So on to the strategy. It's broken into, I think you've all had a chance to look at it. It's broken into three areas. So one is sort of looking at what you have in terms of tree, hedges and woodlands across East Devon. This is one of the canopy cover maps that's been produced, and it breaks down canopy cover by rural and urban. We have had some feedback on these maps, and we'll be changing them accordingly, so adding place names and trying to make it a bit clearer by taking off that green background for the rural areas. Yeah, so as you can see there, 21.7% canopy cover across the district, 22% in rural areas and 12.6% in urban areas. The second part of the strategy really comes down to community engagement and collaboration. So you can see aims, actions here. We've started to populate some of them, and aim to have at least one tree ward in each ward of the district. Potentially working with local arts sector to promote the benefits of trees, creation of community orchards, facilitating neighbourhood tree nurseries, and establishing working groups across East Devon to disseminate best practice. And then the final part of the strategy goes on to really the management of trees, hedges and woodlands and how they can be looked after and cared for. A particular area of interest has been trees and development, obviously with Cranbrook having the lowest canopy in the district, bar East Exmouth Town, and how any future developments can be sort of protected from having that lack of tree cover, how we can sort of incorporate green infrastructure and trees into new developments. So developing an SPD to sit alongside this document in terms of new developments will be a key of that, and looking at reaching 30% tree canopy cover in all new developments. There's a rule that was created by a Dutch professor, Cecil Knievendijk, which is the 330-300 rule, and that suggests that you should be able to see 3 trees from your property, have 30% tree canopy cover, and be 300 metres away from a green space. So trying to sort of incorporate that into new town planning to ensure that there's sort of equitable. Yeah.
Sorry, what's an SPD?
Special planning document?
Supplementary planning document. It provides a bit more kind of clarity and detail compared to the strategy, kind of like going into the weeds of it, really.
Yeah, tree hedge protection, policy development and enforcement. So sort of looking to hopefully recommending that you have your enforcement team are trained sort of in specific tree related instances, and looking at ways to try and protect those trees that are already protected, and potentially where appropriate looking at TPOs in consented landscape schemes to improve tree retention in new developments. That's that, isn't it? that's that. So I guess really probably open up to you guys for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ben. First of all, have we got questions from non-members of the committee? We've got Councillor Barlow and Councillor Goodman.
Just a question, you're on about there that we want to make sure we've got enforcement to make sure we're looking after the trees we've got. But aren't you taking one of our tree officers away to do this? Is that going to leave us a bit shy on what we should be doing in the first place? In other words, protecting the trees we've got, which obviously the bigger trees, they're much better at carbon capture, etc., than putting little new trees in. Are we not leaving ourselves a little bit open by removing one officer or half an officer, I think it is, you're allocating to do that?
I don't believe the officers we're halving their role. I think that's they've decided to go into a part-time role or something like that, and their role is being part of that role is to deliver the tree strategy and looking at the gains that can bring, such as cumulative gains of engagement of the community as well. So as you know, engaging, say, tree wardens, for example, could be as important for retaining and looking after the treescape, as well as, say, trying to chase every developer down. And part of the work, for example, mentioned, say, training for enforcement officers, so they understand how to, say, you know, deal with kind of trees on development sites or monitor those as well.
And just another question then, and I presume you're talking about this percentage you want to increase. I presume the majority of this Clinton Devon, people like that, big landowners, will be encouraged to plant trees, not necessarily by us, but by the government, because they get funds to do that, etc. How many trees are you hoping that East Devon actually encourages to plant? Do we have a number, or is
I don't think we've put a number on the trees to plant, because I think a lot of the work that's come out of this is, say, the maintenance and enhancement of existing trees, or say you could plant, say, 1,000 trees, but if they're planted in the wrong place, or that, you know, they could all die, it's probably better to focus attention on the maintenance of good growing trees, for example. So there's a high level target of 30% canopy cover for the district. I think that's kind of the kind of high level aspiration. In terms of the numbers of trees and how many you need to get to that level is you know, it's quite a theoretical exercise to do that. So there isn't a number per se to say we're going to plant 1,000 trees or 1,000,000 trees. Certainly tree planting is part of it, but also part of it is enhancement of existing trees, trying to work, for example, you mentioned with private landowners, ENGOs, so environmental non-government organisations, so places like the Woodland Trust, who they have massive targets for tree planting, the National Trust as well, for example. So they're more best placed, for example, to do large-scale tree planting. So it'd be kind of partnership working with them, rather than saying East Devon District Council are going to purchase some land and plant a load of trees. So it's kind of that engagement with others. Also, we have 2/3 of the district within the national landscape now. Their management plans also from the Glover report, which is to do with national landscapes for large-scale tree planting targets. So it's trying to tie in with these other bodies, which are also looking for doing tree planting amongst other measures, and what we can do to enable that or contribute towards that.
And what exactly do we think we're going to be able to? Who is this? I just wonder who this report is aimed at. You know, is it aimed at our citizens or the residents, or is it aimed at people like the National Trust and the Woodland Trust that obviously are experts in their own right, and I presume they've got their own plans of what they want to do? I just wonder, who are we trying to enthuse? Are we trying to enthuse our residents with this? And if so, is this a little bit highbrow? Because I must admit, I love this sort of thing and I love reading reports, but I was struggling to read it and understand everything about it, and wondered what we're trying to, what the aim is of it.
Yeah, well, I think the aim was to engage everyone, especially the public, and the community engagement. And I think the recommendation for the part-time officer is particularly to enable that community engagement. You know, for example, looking at tree nurseries, for example, and working with others. There's also the element of development management side of things, in terms of the officers working on local plan policy to tighten that up. So it's trying to be you know, kind of holistic in its approach. It's not just focusing on, say, doing tree planting, just doing development management. just working in communities, it's kind of high level strategy to cover all of those areas, and we recognise within the strategy some of the stuff is like I say, it's trying to make it as plain English and as accessible as possible, and it's not a final strategy yet. It is being worked on, and there has been several iterations of that, and we are mindful that we want it to be an accessible document for everyone and not just to be a shelter. So we want to realise some of the actions within the plan.
I think also, adding to Will's side of things, is we can only affect, the biggest way we can affect tree planting is in with our local plan, which is a big one, which is the right time to be doing it. And I know Chris Hariardi's sitting just over there, our officer, has been working alongside with the local plan. And that, I think, is one of our key ways we, as East Devon, can actually influence big time, because we've got lots of new properties will be popping up, and Cranbrook just indicates we got it wrong, because they're only down at 10%. And we need to make sure all the new buildings that we actually produce, or the sites and provision for housing, actually give the people the right tree cover, or a good tree cover, rather than a quite depressing looking place. It's one of those which I think we're a partner, but we've got many other partners, and we need to strengthen up with working with communities big time. Tree wardens, we need those tree wardens. I know Devon County have them, but as East Devon, I don't believe that we've got a active people active within East Devon reporting back to us, have we?
Yeah, we have had stakeholders who represent parish councils and town councils who are tree wardens. I'm not sure whether they're signed up to the council tree warden scheme, but I don't think that's really necessary. And certainly, as you get an officer dealing with engagement, then that should hopefully be something that can be driven forwards. And I suppose something for all of you as councillors to take away how you can potentially, hopefully, enlist a few more tree wardens. Having that resource, obviously, in such a large sort of rural county is extremely important to have eyes and ears on the ground for the officers in the council.
Thank you very much. Before I come to you, Mike, I'm going to go to Jeff, Councillor Jeff Young. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up some of the issues here. It's not a numbers game. We're not aiming to plant 1,000, 1 million. It doesn't matter how many we plant. In fact, one landowner has told me recently that he's going to be planting 1 million. So that's a good step of the way. But we also need to be aware that some of these woodlands are managed woodlands, and we're going to be cutting down as much as we're going to be planting. So, as I say, it's not a numbers game. It's a canopy cover that we really want. London is classified as a forest. It was 22%, and we're just about there. But I would love to see 30%. I would love to see even more than that. But the aim of this is to get everyone in partnership, in thinking about trees, just as much as people years ago were anti-smoking and not smoking in the public. It's got to be sort of a habit that we look after our trees, we don't cut our trees down, and if there's a tree that is in the wrong place, we should be seeing how we can manage it rather than just cutting it down. So it's working with everyone and making it almost an antisocial attitude of, oh, you mustn't cut down a hedge, you mustn't do this with a tree. And that's the sort of way we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Going back to Councillor Goodman first, and then I'll come inside.
Yes. First of all, I have to disagree in not setting a target. I think we had a great opportunity to set a target. many successful councils throughout the country have been setting targets. In fact, Ian would know that in Sidmouth, 4 years ago, they set a target of one for every resident, 12,000, and they're going to achieve that target. I think we missed a great opportunity. I've said it before, but I'll say it again, because I think people will then understand this, how they can help. And I think talking about tree canopy cover, what's important is won't have the same ring to our residents as the number of trees. But I want to cover this whole issue of canopy cover. We're saying we've got 21.7%, and we're looking at 30% is what this, and I won't pronounce the name, Cecil said we should be aiming for. But we could never get there. Do we know how many trees we'd have to plant to achieve that? Millions and millions. We would never do it, because for every hectare we've got of trees, they will have 1,100 trees on average. Sometimes it could be a little bit more, but on average. And we've got 17,700 hectares. If we went to 30%, just imagine how many trees that would be. I also think that issue of the 3, 30 and 300 needs to be explained in the cabinet report, what it actually means. And it's not in there yet, but I think it would be helpful too, so people knew what that actually meant. The next point is I'm rather surprised no one's mentioned noise. Not anywhere in the report does it say about noise. Noise is very helpful for actually stopping noise go, but it's not even mentioned, and I'm surprised. The other point I just mentioned is that we say about in the report that we're going to chart in where all the trees are. That is not an easy job, and I think you all know that. We need some timescales to that and the cost to it. My final point would be, I think when it comes to cabinet and to be able to chart it going forward, there's an awful lot of actions in here. Some have got responsibilities, some haven't. Many of them haven't got dates. I think it should be an action plan with proper dates so it can be monitored by full council, the progress this is going to make. There's a lot of other things I could say, but I won't. But I'm going to say again, I think we've missed an opportunity in not engaging our public with putting a number to it. Thank you.
Do you want, I can take some of that. And so in terms of noise pollution, I've just put up the side, 6% of the consultees thought that the main benefit of the trees was reducing noise. I'll ensure that it is added into the tree benefits section as well and references made to it. In terms of tree planting targets, I understand where you're coming from, and they are extremely popular. The reason, I guess, that the government have taken on board what the forestry industry and the arboriculture industry would say is they've set canopy cover targets rather than just tree planting numbers. And many successful councils may have set tree planting targets. Most have failed in meeting them. And in my experience, most have failed in meeting them. And planting, we should look towards establishment. And I would say there's another issue in East Devon that I know as a district, natural regeneration is favoured. So therefore, if you're setting a target of tree numbers and you've set aside 10 hectares for natural regeneration, you're not planting a single tree in that area. So actually looking at canopy cover as a metric reflects the varying methods for tree establishment. And it's far from us at Tree Economics to set a target. Were there any other points that I've not?
I'll just add as well, in terms of the actions, it is still in a draft format, and we have to recognise as well, as LPO, we do have limited budgets. There's a lot of stuff that would be really nice to do in terms of survey effort and stuff like that, but there's going to be choices to make in terms of where's the best to channel limited resources. For example, I think the community engagement is coming up as a high priority for that, because that probably gets the biggest returns if you're getting the cumulative gains of voluntary engagement, and that's trying to that can cover things as well in consideration of, say, like our health policies and that within the district to get people out in nature as well. Yeah, in terms of everyone plants a tree, that might be, like you said, that might be an interesting proposition. As Ben said, we have a strong focus on kind of natural regeneration as well, but that not to say it couldn't be part of a community engagement action, or again, possibly if you had a tree warding in your parish, to encourage them to have a scheme like that, like a plant a tree for yourself, or a community orchard, or whatever else it could be.
Thank you. Coming into committee, we've got Councillor John Heath, then Councillor Levine, and then Haggerty. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This increase from 22% to 30%, I think you need a metric. I agree with Councillor Goodman, actually, otherwise it's meaningless. Is it 22% then in terms of hectares? Because it'd be very difficult to measure the number of trees in the district by number, wouldn't it? I just want to be clear on that particular point. Thanks.
I mean, that would be almost impossible, really. You know, you need access to all the private land that there is. So canopy cover is a metric that we can come by quite easily with satellite imagery or LiDAR photography. So it's easily quantifiable, and it can be replicated as well. So you can stay on top of where you are 5 or 10 year intervals.
Thank you. Going over to Councillor Levine.
Thank you, Chair. I was very pleased to see that hedgerows have come into appear here, because I've been brainwashed to believe that hedgerows are very good in retaining water and stopping flooding, and that the tearing up of the hedgerows over the past 20 years is one of the problems caused a lot of flooding, even up on the hills where I live. So I was wondering, I can't really see a lot of detail here about hedgerows, but I was wondering, how do you see us being able to persuade farmers to put hedgerows about, to replant all the hedgerows? Or do you see it in a different context?
Well, I think in terms of the farming community, I think the national landscape teams within the district have a huge part to play, because they're engaged on the ground with farmers in terms of farm advice. They have the scheme called FIPL, Farming in Protected Landscape. So I think they have the kind of ears on the ground of farmers, and I guess it's possibly not replanting hedgerows, but the management of hedgerows, the kind of natural regeneration of hedgerows. You know, if we can encourage them to cut them less frequently, so every other year or every third year, variation to cutting height, the cutting width, you know, not trees in the middle of or hedges within the middle of a field. They don't need to kind of cut them like a nice box, because that's going to have multiple benefits, as you say, for kind of water retention, but also other kind of ecosystem services such as invertebrates, wildlife, again, catching, say, pesticide runoff. So it has multiple benefits. It's difficult to engage with the farming community, and again, it's not we don't have a direct influence over them. We're not setting that policy, but I think also within East Devon we're quite unique. We've got quite a few free landscape recovery projects, again, which is looking at how green finance can influence landscape scale projects. So there's the Upper Otter and Lower Otter projects. There's also the Killerton landscape recovery projects, which are looking at landscape scale initiatives, and certainly you know, things encourage them to do what they can do with hedgerows, through hedgerow management, for example, and so the landscape recovery schemes are at the top of what's called the ELMS schemes, which is taking over kind of how farmers are kind of paid for providing services to the environment, essentially. So if they're let the hedges grow out, they receive certain payment if they're losing part of their land. Obviously, you have to recognise as well, food production is vitally important as well. So there's always that kind of tension of, you know, it's not just saying just let everything be wild. You know, it's again, as a district, there's a high proportion of, say, dairy farms, for example, and industry. So it's trying to find that balance, and again, that kind of working with partners. And I think the National Landscape team have got a great role with the hedgerows in particular.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Del Haggerty.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to, first of all, I'd like to compliment the report. It's excellent. I don't think we should be going for targets and numbers and things. I think there should be natural growth, and it's great to see the integration of the hedgerows and the managing of that as well. I think that would be well planned. But I think a lot of it is going to come down to the success of it is going to be into the new local plan. If that's, thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Can I bring in Chris regarding the local plan and say, because I think this is one of the key areas and I know there's some draft work going on. Can you enlighten us a little bit, please?
Well, yes. Sorry.
Press.
Yeah, there we are. Okay, is that better? Yes, I've been working with Will and also Alistair Jeans. We've been looking at the current draft policies within the local plan for tree and landscape and ecology, and we've been working up amendments to those policies, which are going through consideration at the moment. One of the things we're looking at is obviously the local plan policies are fairly limited in the text that can be provided. There's been reference to SPD production, which will support policy. So, for instance, with tree planting, we're aware there's a lot of poor practice out there with developers not putting in trees of the right quality, not planting them in the right way, not looking after them. The SPD document can set out our requirements for street trees in particular, which are being planted in a very harsh environment with lots of hard paving around them, to make sure there's adequate soil volume, and we can set standards for that sort of thing. So as well as the policies that we're looking at, we're also wanting to back that up with the SPD. The policies that we're looking at will specify retention of trees and hedgerows in the first place, wherever possible, anything that's important and contributes to landscape character. And set standards if trees do have to be cleared for the numbers of replacement planting and the scale of replacement planting to compensate for that loss. And another aspect that we're looking at the moment is in relation to holding retention against developers through a bond to make sure they carry out maintenance properly, and then that's released at the end of a 5-year term. And that's, I'm not sure whether we get that through, but that would be a major step, I think, in securing trees being established in the landscape, because going around Cranbrook and many of the other West End development sites, we're aware that there's very high tree failure rates at the moment on these sites, probably in excess of 50% in many cases. So that's something that we're looking to address.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. Now moving to Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions actually. So maybe the first one has got a planning slant as it follows yours. I'm not referring to the local plan here, but have we done any consulting with regards to protecting the trees that we've got in terms of looking at TPOs, where we can do more TPOs? And can we tighten up our policy with regards to TPOs? Because sometimes, I mean, I've had an instance where a TPO, there was a TPO on a tree in one instance, and then it was taken away. And there were circumstances around that. But I just came away from the whole process thinking that we weren't doing enough to protect some of the trees that we've already got. So that's my first question.
Okay, in terms of TPOs, that's not my area of specialism. The tree officers, who's unfortunately not here tonight, that's kind of his area. But from my understanding, East Devon has one of the highest levels of TPOs. I think there's someone mooted it as more than Cornwall at one point. In terms of the administration of that, I think there's potentially a risk of the burden if you blanket TPO everything to manage the process of registering them and the administration of that. It can have unintended consequences in terms of just the time taken to do that. On the specifics of removing of TPOs, I'd have to defer to my tree colleagues on that. That's just not an area that I specialise in. So
the message is though that, you know, it's great that we're looking at increasing our canopy cover, but we should also look at protecting the ones we've already got. And if that means having a conversation with that team, I think we should be doing that as well as part of this.
I believe we got quite a lot of TPOs, more than normal in the area. I could probably bring Councillor Young in on that one.
Yeah, yeah, we have got more TPOs than the whole of Cornwall, so we do really well on that. The problem is the policing of it, and we haven't got that many officers, and that's one of the things that we want to engage in with the public, is that if they see a tree being cut down, don't leave it and then moan. No, contact us and we can do something about it. 30 years ago, we set up the tree warden scheme, and pretty well every parish and town did have tree wardens. Unfortunately, 30 years on, a lot of those tree wardens are just about standing still, but they want to retire, and we need to recruit a lot of new tree wardens, and we want to recruit a lot of more people to be able to be our eyes when they do hear the chainsaw. More often than not, chainsaws are being legally used, but yeah, there are the occasions when landowners will cut down a tree just before a planning application, and we can't do anything about that, unfortunately. We don't know the planning application is coming through, so it's one of those things that I'd rather spend a lot more time encouraging people to plant more trees than worrying about the odd about 20 trees a year that are cut down that were TPO'd.
And so I think I'll go to Will.
So I just wanted to add on to the TPO thing and retention of trees and avoidance is always kind of, when you're looking at development proposals, avoidance is always the most preferred option in terms of hierarchy of if you can, if not to mitigate or the last resort to cut down. Just to add on to Jeff's point about people pre-felling stuff, you know, you can't police everything, but for example, there's new kind of mechanisms now within, say, biodiversity net gain, where you can look at aerial imagery and if something's been taken out, if it's after January 2020, you can assume that tree was there and value that, and the developer would now have to mitigate for that. So they've started to come into mechanisms where we do have a bit more you know, leverage to kind of value those trees or disincentivize the kind of pre-felling of that. You know, we don't like to see that, and there's, you know, potential other issues with, say, protected species. You know, it could be bat roosts in there or dormice using trees as well. So I think it's got to be a combination of things. You know, TPOs has definitely got their part to play in that, as well as kind of establishment and maintenance of trees and new development sites, as well as good site design that retains good trees. And we have to recognise as well issues such as you know, things like ash dieback as well, and what longer term what happens with those trees which are lost, and can those be retained as, say, for example, dead wood within hedges or woodlands, because that provides important habitat as well, rather than just removing it.
Thank you. I think Councillor Martin has got another question first.
I do, and I'm not fully satisfied with the answer to my previous one, but maybe we can talk about that offline.
Okay.
I wasn't able to make the meeting that we've already had, but I totally intend to go to the next one.
Okay.
The next one was, how has the strategy been received by key landowners? I'm really interested to know if there's a commitment to engage with it and, you know, and to actually, you know, plant more trees, particularly landowners with farms, predominantly farms involved. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of farm, I wouldn't know. In terms of individual landowners, certainly to the stakeholder engagement, we invited all large landowners, for example, like Clinton Devon Estates, Coombe Estates, National Trust.
Yeah, we did invite FWAG and CLA as well. Unfortunately, they didn't engage. It's not something, you know, in our gift to force them to do so, unfortunately. Hopefully through the dissemination of the strategy when it is published and those enhanced public engagement measures, then farmers can be reached more, and hopefully, you know, perhaps FWAG and other people may come on board. But yeah, all we can do is invite them, and we didn't have a huge turnout of farmers, unfortunately. That would have been fantastic. And you know, part of this will be linking with the Devon Hedge Group, who do have a lot of farmers amongst their members. So hopefully that will serve as a tool for reaching some of them. If you wanted me to just backtrack quickly on your TPO questions, it is a very contentious subject. The Woodland Trust certainly believe, as I would share their feelings, we need far better protection for our ancient and veteran trees. They're not afforded protection, you know, without a TPO being applied. And in terms of the Town and Country Planning Act and the making of tree preservation orders, a significant part of that is expedience. So is there a threat to the tree? I don't want to get too involved in that, because that's you know, Alistair has his feelings on tree protection orders, but something that we can do hopefully is improve, or through the policy is improve enforcement, at least make people think that there's a risk of enforcement, and then potentially reduce contraventions. But it is a very difficult it's a very difficult thing. You know, you need good evidence to be able to do anything. Quite often, you know, the tree's gone before anyone realizes anything, so you know there's the burden of proof. But yeah, the TPO system certainly fails a lot of trees, and there's certainly not much a tree strategy can do to improve national policy.
And so I've had circumstances of TPOs being overridden, unfortunately, by the insurance company. And it's just an absolute nightmare, because if there's a tree deemed root there, they can take it down. We need the government to change policy there on that one, unfortunately. For going over quickly to Mike, if it's relevant, and then I'll come back to Ollie Davey.
Yeah, but to just help the debate on the TPOs, I actually was quite impressed that it's actually in the document. It's in the strategy document T7, page 16, and what they're going to do. I was surprised to see it and pleased to see it, because you've recognised the issue. You haven't resolved it, but you're recognising it, and that's all a strategy could do. So I was pleased it was actually in there.
Thank you, Councillor Goodman. Councillor Ollie Davey.
Thank you. Just a quick observation on numbers, by the way, and the meaninglessness of numbers of trees. I gave a report on Exmouth's tiny forest to the Tree Forum this morning in Exmouth. We planted 600 trees in an area about the size of a tennis court. So, you know, 600 trees in an area like that is extremely intense. They're about a foot apart, but conventional planting would be putting them several meters apart. So I think canopy is a much better indicator and a much better target to go for. And actually even do nothing would increase tree canopy as trees grow. So I think it is a better metric to use. We've mentioned a local plan, and I think planning is going to be crucial here. And one thing I would quite like to see is a specific target for new developments for the number of trees that perhaps have to be planted. 1 per house, 2 per house, 3 per house. Developers might not be quite so keen to cut them down if they know they're going to have to put them back again. It might also, you know, prevent Jeff's suggestion of preemptive felling that we do sometimes see. So I'm just wondering if there's any aim to put in a specific target for tree cover. I know it would be tricky because it would depend on the development and so on, but whether we can somehow work around that in order to kind of have some kind of phrasing that enables us to set a kind of target for how many trees. And people would rather live in a tree-lined street, I'm sure, any time. And I think they're going to become more and more crucial for shade anyway. And I know when I've been abroad, you're walking from tree to tree as quickly as possible and then slowing down under the tree. And finally, on protection, we've had a case in Exmouth recently where a beautiful mature oak is due to be felled because the insurance company is insisting on it. Will is probably aware of this one. Insisting on it because they suggest that it is undermining the wall of a house. I think that's ongoing at the moment, but I think there's not a lot we can do. So I'm wondering if there's any kind of higher level engagement that we can do with things like insurance companies to say to them, you know, there could be better ways of reducing the water demands of this tree than simply felling the whole thing. Yeah, a few points there to pick up
On in terms of subsidence, which is the one issue that trees obviously can't be retained frequently through insurance companies or just the pressure that they'll apply. I am currently writing up a best practice appendix, and within that is the London Tree Officers Association substance mitigation protocol and authorities that are implementing best practice when it comes to insurance claims. And some authorities are successfully challenging that through root barriers, soil moisture level monitoring. Some of that may well be, you know, you have to look at a public benefit in any of your decisions making processes, but at least there'll be reference to best practice and hopefully a bit more power to the sort of bow of Alistair and his team in terms of contesting subsidence claims.
Thank you very much. I do know that Alistair has been working hard on that one, because I've been in talks with him on it and I've made comments and things, and he's trying to do preemptive work. Not on that one, I don't think he'll win that one, unfortunately, but he's trying to go to them and say, look, can we do this? And we can do other things. And he is trying on that front, because it's not just in Exmouth, it's all over the place in East Devon it's happening. So that's key, that he is very active and would like to see government change policies to actually help prevent this sort of thing, because it's the easy way out, dare I say, for the insurance company. I think Councillor Young has got, and then Councillor Barlow.
Sorry, did I get an
Oh,
answer
sorry.
to my question about whether we were planning to set any kind of specific target and planning? Yeah, probably
Can
one
I
for you,
bring in
Chris,
Chris on that one, please?
Whether it's worth attempting to set a specific target for the amount of tree cover to be provided in new developments, or not cover, but the amount of tree planting.
I think it goes back to, to the canopy target aim of 30%. It's difficult to do numbers, and I think it needs to be concentrated also in public open space areas and streets and public areas, because private gardens is an issue, so you can't have people moving into new houses often take out trees that are planted within their gardens, and we have limited control over that. But I think overall we should be looking at new streets should be tree lined, and we should be having targets for overall cover, potential canopy cover of 30% at maturity. Individual numbers I think might be tricky, but
I think Will?
just to add to that as well, in terms of the draft plan policy you mentioned about trees being removed. So there's something we've seen in the Bristol local plan in terms of a replacement kind of ratios for trees if people are taking trees out. So we have something in the draft plan about if they're removing trees for how many, they've got to replace them. Biodiversity net gain as well, which is a mandatory requirement now for most developments, also have a measuring of individual trees, and if you're losing them, you do have to replace them, and to get an increased gain on those, although that's not necessarily tied to the development site, because biodiversity net gain you can go off site. So the local plan policy is an idea so trees are retained on a site as well.
Thank you very much. Quick one, Jeff, to...
Yeah, I could see Councillor Goodman querying about tiny forests. It's something I don't know much about myself, but I believe it's a Japanese theory, and We've tried it in one place in Exmouth, and it won an award this year. And we will be hoping to plant another one very shortly, again in Exmouth. Regarding TPOs, it really needs updating. The law needs updating. It's very labour intensive to do it, and a lot of paperwork. So as many TPOs we have, we cut down trees to do the paperwork. Regarding the large trees cut down near houses, that the tree has outgrown the garden. Unfortunately, if they do cut the trees down, there's as much damage from the roots when they shrink, and even more damage. So it's got to be a balanced view, and unfortunately, insurance companies do generally win against a TPO.
That's very true. Thank you, Councillor Young. Ollie, did you want to explain about the Little Forest, or are you quite happy to move on?
I should have brought my tiny forest notes with me, because I had it all laid out this morning because I had to do it in a short space of time. The tiny forest principle was developed in Japan by a guy called Miyawaki. I think his first name is something like Akiro or Shiro, but Miyawaki is the method. And the idea is to plant a very dense woodland in a very small space, in a very rich, or as rich a medium as you can get, which in our case was compost, about 6 inches of compost on top of a grass area in a park. Our actual design is semicircular, but the area is roughly that of a tennis court. And the idea is that because the trees are competing with each other, you get very fast growth, and you also get a much faster increase in biodiversity than you would get with conventional planting. And we've already seen that from the number of mini beasts that are turning up. Fortunately, we've got some tree keepers, as we call them, who are monitoring the area and finding all sorts of interesting caterpillars and ladybirds and all sorts of interesting bugs in there. So it's a theory, but it's proving extremely effective so far. And the size of the trees compared to the control group that was planted outside is very dramatic. And if anybody is interested, I urge you to come over to Exmouth, come down to Carter Avenue, and have a look.
Thank you very much. I actually did go
Should
down
just
there.
add, it was highlighted by the BBC tonight on their local news bulletin. I don't know if was it on Spotlight? No, but it was highlighted on the BBC website. I think that the Tiny Forest, as part of Exmouth in Bloom's submission to Britain in Bloom, had received 2 awards for environmental work.
Brilliant. Councillor Barlow, and
Thank you.
then Councillor Dumper.
Thank you, Chair. Talk about engaging with farmers, and as East Devon, we don't have much contact with farmers, whereas your little local parishes do. And I know people don't like these things about numbers and you want to, I understand you're experts and you understand about canopy cover. You know that Torquay, they've done a 10-year survey and that they've increased their canopy cover even though we've lost some ash, and haven't done a lot of planting there because, as someone said, trees grow, canopy cover grows, which is a great thing, which will hopefully get us to the 30%. But the PR part of this, of taking our public with us, of taking our residents with us, they're not experts. They don't understand this. I've learned a lot about this because I've worked with the Arboretum, and these are people with passion, like your tree keepers, I'm sure, in Exmouth. They have passion to do this, the time to do this, but they take other people along with this because people are, I'm not saying they're simple, but they understand simple things, like numbers, of putting in trees, And the farmers, again, we found in Sidmouth, are engaging with us now because the people that they do, their daughters, their sons, they go to school with different people, they're engaging, they're excited about it. So it's taking the people with us on all these things. I'm going to have a report here, 63 pages, but I promise you, much as it might be the best report in the world to technical people, the majority of people will not understand it, don't have the time or interest to read it. So we need something a little bit simple for the people. All of your bigger people, your Clinton Devons, they'll lap this up and they'll understand it. They can go out, they can get grants on it. It's a business to them. Of course, they're going to plant trees. So if you want to take people with them, don't, even though you're going to lose some of the trees, we accept we're going, when we plant trees in Sidmouth, we know we will lose a percentage of them, but it doesn't matter. When it gets to protection, we have TPOs. What about HPOs? What about hedge protection orders? Because hedges are probably as important as trees. Can't we have, you know, it's all very well saying we'll plant those more trees in these new developments, but of course we're told by government we have to squeeze so many houses per hectare in. There isn't a lot of room left for trees as well, and certain size trees, the right trees, which is why this is important to get the right trees in there. But hedges are really important, and then they need protecting, so they can't be removed afterwards because they are a pain to look after if you're a normal Joe Bulks or whatever, you've got to cut it. They put hedge fences in, they're nice and easy, they need painting once every 5 years. So we need to think about that. That's something we could do in our local plan. We're not going to be able to force loads of trees because the government is saying you've got to put so many houses on these sites and land is expensive. If Jeff said about smoking, smoking has been a long-term project to get people to think it's antisocial. It's a filthy habit, no one should smoke. But at the end of the day, it takes time to do that, and you've got to engage the people. And by doing numbers, I think you will engage them more than just canopy number, canopy percentage, etc.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. I think we've got Councillor Dumper next.
Thanks very much, Anne. Yeah, we've today, I mean, Councillor Ollie Davey and myself have been involved with quite a lot of tree stuff, and in fact, we did the other night with our briefing. So I'm absolutely immersed in tree and hedge stuff at the moment. If I can just quickly address the point that Ian Barlow's making there, which is about engaging people. I mean, one of the ideas of this report is to do just that. I sympathise with what you say, but if you look at what actually happens when people come along, like with the Tiny Forest project, which Ollie has been having a lot to do with, then you find they get involved in the actual thing, the actual process, if you like, of doing that. And in particular, because that's such an unusual approach, I think lots of people, and I know you canvassed up and down the local road, and loads of people from that road actually got involved. So, you know, there are other ways other than numbers, and we have had this kind of numbers argument in Exmouth Town Council with our tree forum, and we have definitely set out that numbers of trees individually is not the key issue, and I think that's understood. And we actually, I was going to say preach, sorry, that's the wrong word, but encourage people out there to think in a slightly different way. And I think this report, while it wouldn't be understood, as you rightly say, by every person on the street, if you like, but it will be understood by those people who are going to activate people at that level. And I think it's sort of a top level thing and actually pushing people underneath. I'd like to go back next to the issue of tree wardens, and it is difficult to recruit them, and I think if there's an interesting project, then I think that would recruit more. I imagine, because I know Sidmouth have done a lot of work on trees, and it may well be that you've got a number of tree wardens in Sidmouth. We are looking in Exmouth to getting one per ward, at least. But so far, it hasn't been brilliant. This case of the oak tree that is going to be, whether it is going to be felled now, was brought up by our very enthusiastic local tree warden. And he has, although he does have links with district council, he has a lot of links with us as town councillors and brings these things forward for us. So yeah, we do see that. I wish Alistair Jeans were here tonight, because Alistair would tell you about the numerous trees that have been lost through both through insurance company subsidence issues and other issues. So, but he knows an enormous amount about this, and pity he's not here. He was with us this morning, and that was very useful. And I can only endorse with the hedge thing, and I just wondered whether I could ask Ben and Will if there is any metric on hedge preservation, because we see all the time with new developments, hedges ripped out. I mean, there's a new development going on at the moment with a road development, and hedges are being ripped out. And the length of time that it's going to take to replace that hedge is, well,
Yeah, well,
is unfortunate.
I guess to answer both your points. Hedges need to be measured and replaced within biodiversity net gain on any development sites. So that's another mechanism. In terms of community engagement as well, that is key. And yeah, I understand that kind of language and accessibility and inclusivity is vitally important as well. One of the things that the tree strategy looks at is tree equity. So where it kind of indicates, and some of the work that Woodland Trust has done, that places where have the most disadvantaged kind of communities actually have the least tree coverage. So, part of the role of, say, community engagement is how do you reach those people who don't have access to trees or may not be engaged in a strategy document. It's more how can you engage the volunteers, and we have an excellent track record in East Devon. So the Wild East Devon, I believe it's over 200 volunteers doing amazing work on our nature reserves, people coming in week in, week out. So we're already doing this in East Devon, engaging volunteers to get out and do practical stuff. So, and I know, I believe the street scene have some work looking at wildlife improvement policy and wildlife wardens. So I think there's other areas where we can engage those kind of more urban communities in trees and the benefits of trees. And, perhaps, there's maybe a kind of high level, almost like an executive summary we could do for, of the strategy. But we also want it to be an exemplar of best practice as well. So I guess we don't want to shy away from kind of trying to make the best strategy as we can, really.
Thank you. I think I'll come to you, Roy, in a second. I've just got a couple questions. With the local plan, will developers have a guideline or handbook to work from for their landscape designers, because very often it's very generic and it's not very appropriate. I think we could do well with actually having a booklet to be able to say, that's what you need to look at and that's what we want to see.
Well, that's the SPD document that we talked about earlier. That would set out standards, requirements for planting. If we can get that prepared and adopted by the council, then that would beef out the policy.
Thank you, Chris. And the other thing, which I think is for you, Will, or policy, there's not a policy at the moment for replacing trees regarding EDDC's land. Own stock, if it fells a tree or it's fallen over, needs taking out due to health and safety or disease. Do we actually have a policy saying that we're actually going to be planting 2 for that one or anything like that?
I don't think there's one there at the moment. I did have a brief word with Ali on this, and there is consideration in terms of whether planting a tree is the best idea in that place. It might be natural regeneration is preferred option there, or maintenance of nearby existing trees. So I'm not sure that's not in there, but that's under discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Roy Collins.
Thank you. I've been sat here listening quietly, and I'm a farmer and a landowner, and I don't think there's anything here that's going to encourage farmers to be planting trees, what I've heard so far. But in the 1950s, after the war, 1948, we had the Forestry Commission, and they bought up thousands and thousands of acres of farmland and planted trees, and they planted over 350 acres at Offwell Woods. Well, a bit of that woodland was sold off, and the landowner who bought it, he decided to harvest the timber, and it cost him a lot of money to cut the trees down and have them harvested, and at the end of the day, for what he sold the timber for, he ended up with nothing. He had no income from those trees, and they'd been there since 1952. There was nothing there. Under these new DEFRA schemes, SFI, if you've got less than 3 acres, or 3 hectares, sorry, you can't claim anything. It's so stupid. I mean, that's all very well for large farms, perhaps Sussex, East Anglia, Cambridge, where you've got thousands of acres, but round here, most farmers are quite small acreages. And they're not going to want to put perhaps 3 hectares into woodland in one group. They could probably plant odd corners, awkward areas on their farm, perhaps steep banks for trees. Now, I can't see how you're going to achieve these aims. And you're welcome, any councillor is welcome to come to my farm and see what proper hedge laying is. We lay our hedges, and we do not put up fencing, netting, and barbed wire around. Because if you let a proper traditional hedge is laid and it's stock-proof, and that's what my hedges are. So if any councillors want to take up my offer, I'd be very happy to show them round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roy Collins. Coming from the farming side of things, my parents actually planted a woodland nearly 30 years ago near Exeter Airport, or on that road. And it is wood. It was an initiative to actually find faster growing trees to produce for timber and wood turning. And it's now a proper little woodland. And there are farmers out there who are interested. And I say it's just getting engagement, even if it's councillors going out there. We've got our job to do here as well, to engage with landowners on the smaller scale in our wards. So, but, and hedgerows being laid properly is a dying art, but it is a good art to watch. Thank you. Any other questions, or anyone want to do a recommendation? Councillor Heath? Councillor?
Just a quick one. I do support the laying of more hedges rather than just trees, because hedges, as has been explained, are very, very good for carbon capture and also for preventing floods. And I think if you look at some of the big farms in East Anglia, I mean, Rory Collins will correct me if I'm wrong, they have got rid of a lot of hedges on the fens, and that has been to their detriment. And I think Devon is probably, in terms of percentage, lower in tree cover than a lot of other areas of England because of the moorland areas, actually. So if you can encourage hedgerow growth, that can only be a positive thing, in my humble opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Heath. Councillor Levine?
I was going to make a recommendation that we adopt, that we go along with officer recommendations.
So you would like us to adopt the final draft of the East Devon Tree, Hedgerow and Woodland Strategy for 2024 to 2034, which reflects the ambitions and opportunities to protect East Devon's tree landscape and create new opportunities for tree planting, working in partnership with key stakeholders. And also part 2 of it is endorsing the strategy's proposal to appoint a part-time tree and woodland project officer role to enable the delivery of the strategy. The budget and costs for this role are already secured within the existing salary budget due to a vacant part-time role within the tree team. So we have a proposal, we have a seconder from Councillor Haggerty. We have a, do you want to say something, Councillor
Yes,
Reid?
thank you for reading it all out. There were lots of words with more than one syllable, which are difficult for me.
I knew I was going to be helping you there. Councillor Barlow, before we go to a vote?
Very quick question on that, the last part of that. Secured within the existing salary budget due to a vacant part-time post within the tree team. That means you are taking someone out of a position that we know we're talking about. We need to enforce what we've got, protect the trees we've got. We are taking someone out of that. It's vacant at the moment. That's probably because we can't go to the post. We haven't found the right person, whatever. We're taking someone out of that to put it in this. If we take this seriously, we should ask the man on the end of the table there, can we have a little bit more budget, please, to have an extra officer? I know he will probably say no, but otherwise you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it's stupid.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. Simon? Yes, please.
I think robbing to pay Peter to pay Paul is often what we're faced with, I think, within local government finance. Whether the committee accept the recommendation but wish to raise their concerns about the reduction in headcount for tree staff and ask Cabinet to consider the position in the budget, perhaps?
It's an emergency.
Climate emergency.
Oh, yes.
At the end of the day, emergencies cost money and demand action. And I swear, at the moment, we talk about this, but we don't actually do it.
And we certainly need to enforce things.
Without it, it's pointless. We know that. And we're losing someone that was, and we don't have enough now. You're talking about the problems you've got in Exmouth. We've got the same problems in Sidmouth and elsewhere. If you had more people, you could stop more damage.
May I support the idea that Councillor Barlow has brought up there and ask for what you've just asked for to be incorporated as an amendment to this. I'd also like to say that what I didn't say when I was speaking was the National Landscape, which I was on when it was the AONB, I was a member of the partnership, their farming and protected landscapes policy and strategy actually did work. And it would be nice because they've had a big management change recently, and it would be very nice to bring them in on our discussions and any future progress that you do. And the other people who are not here tonight are the Woodland Trust. And of course, the Woodland Trust were founded in Devon just over 50 years ago, and they have just they have their Yonder Wood, which is in Councillor Jeff Young's ward, just outside Exmouth. And they have got some really revolutionary, I don't know whether, Will, you've been over there, but they've got some really revolutionary ideas that they're trialling ecologically. And they're not just trees, they're about hedges, they're about the whole ecology of the area. So we have some great examples within East Devon, and we should use those and see what's going on. Thank you.
So we have a proposal with a additional amendment. Are we, the proposer, happy with the additional amendment and the seconder? And did you capture that one, Anita? Or Sarah? And say, Simon, please.
I think you're agreeing to the recommendation, but want to raise your concerns about the reduction of the post and for Cabinet to consider to continue to include that vacant post in the establishment going forward. Is that right, sir? I can add to it if you want later. Is that okay?
You've got that, Sarah? So can we go to the vote? Everyone in favour? Carried, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item number 8, the work programme, which I've got to go and find my agenda, which is not going to be easy to find. Thank you. We've got in January, well, on here we've got the January meeting, end of January, wildlife improvement policy, which should be coming through to us, and the coach tourism policy, and I think at that point, because we were going to have a verbal update from Councillor Del Haggerty on the working party or working group for the coach tourism. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, it's a good update. 6 towns out of the 8 that are approached have actually put their applications in to be for an inspection. The other 2 towns will follow suit. One nice part about it is Exmouth is actually has already been a coach friendly, so it's actually a straightforward renewal, hopefully. I spoke to Phil Smith today. He was up in Scotland, and I should be meeting him again at the NEC in a couple of weeks' time. And he's hoping to get some of the inspections done during November, mid-November and to the end, and a couple in by December as well. So when the report comes back to overview in January, we should be a lot further forward. I've got to say, what we're trying to get a piece of the action and a bigger slice of the cake is in coach passenger spending. This is in the country. It's been £8.3 billion. Now in leisure, which is sports, football teams and all the other things that go on like that, there's 2.3 billion. Overnight trippers, 1.9 billion. And day trippers, 3.5 billion. International visitors, which is on the rise quite rapidly at the moment, is 610 million. But within the industry, we're looking between 20 and 30% increase next year. What we're asking for here in East Devon, everybody to work together, is a bigger slice of the cake than we've got. It's going to be a lot of the towns working together as well, which would be a great coming together as it was before. Some of the towns may need some signs and extra signage, which is going to be a cost to it. And again, I should come to the man on the end, Simon, at some stage when we get the report. And so I don't know if we can help, I don't know if there's anything in the budgets at all, but we can only ask. But yeah, I think the January update will be a pretty thorough update for overview and the council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haggerty. And say it's coming on at speed, which is really nice to see.
Chair, can I just say one last thing there? Sorry. It's to thank the officers that have been involved in it so far, especially Sarah, who's played quite a big part, and all the other officers. been very, very helpful. Without the help of the officers, we wouldn't get forward at all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much on that lowdown. We have got at the beginning of December a joint overview, scrutiny and housing review board, I think, isn't it? Meeting. Are they at the but no, they're not at the housing review board. Is at not the budget, but the one before it in December. Are they in that one as well?
No.
No.
So you mean the joint meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that'll just be overview and scrutiny.
Sorry, overview and scrutiny. And then we've got our budget meeting in January, which I think we've had dates through already coming through. So that is on that programme. And I hope to have a review, well, there's an ongoing review with policies, and hopefully by April, May, we will have a list of policies which are needing reviewing, so we can then work from that to help us get things on the agenda as well. So that's that bit, and we've also got the forward plan from the Cabinet, and say, have the committee got any views on wanting to look at any of those which are listed on the page? It's quite a dry one, I think, at the moment. But have you no observations there? No. Nope. If you do, let us know. Thank you. And that now brings us to the end of the meeting, and thank you for your participation. Thank you.